Hello, folks. Hello. What's up, fellas? Audio check. First thing I want to make sure that all you guys can hear me. Just give me a holler in the chat if voice has an echo. All right, let me try something else. Let me try something. So we're gonna go to settings. How's the audio now? Audio any better? Just let me know how the audio going. What's going on, David Max? Welcome from Mexico, my brother. So the echo is gone now. Mike, good. So all right. Reason we were having some echoes because I had needs to be louder. Too quiet. Is it any louder? All right, let me know if the volume is any better now. Let me know if the volume is any better. Still need more volume? Is that volume good enough for you all? Yeah? Awesome. So I had to max out my audio interface here. Anyway. So, we got 48 people online. How you guys doing? It's always a pleasure to jump online and chat with you guys. Let me see some of the folks in the chat here. We got Jack. We got Smooth. We got Bob Fredge. Moses Cole. Rudy, Mike Lee, Johnny D, Hamed. All right. It's funny, I'm starting to recognize some of these names and faces now because some of you guys I've been chatting with for 2-3 years now. So as always, I'm glad you guys are here to hang out with me, to chat about how we can get better as musicians, as pianists, and so on. So the topic of discussion today, I'm itchy. Not too long ago came from the barbers and I'm itchy. And it's hot. Ooh. I turned off the AC because I didn't want the AC noise to get picked up in the recording, but whew, burning up in here. So we're going to talk about growth today, particularly this whole business of plateau. I remember the first time I heard about musicians being plateaued when I was a beginner, and I was like, what is that? What do you mean a musician plateaued? And it basically is, you get to a point where you feel like nothing you do is working. You feel like you haven't grown past where you are. And sometimes it could be weeks, months, and even years. I've met musicians who said they haven't grown. They feel like they haven't grown in years. And that's, you peaked, you plateaued. And it's a real thing. It's a frustrating thing because oftentimes when you find yourself in that sort of peak plateaued mode, it's hard to figure out what you need to do to break the cycle. So the big problem is it requires you to do something totally different. But doing what differently? That's the big question, and it's not easy to figure out. So I'm going to share some tips with you, things that have helped me over the years, because I've gone through many plateaued stages. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I think right now I'm in a little bit of plateau state. I feel like the level that I'm at right now, I've been at this level since say 2015. I think I've been at this level since about 2015. And partly why I haven't really grown much is because I'm so busy creating tutorials for you guys. So I haven't really been focusing much on my growth and my direction because I'm creating content for you guys, and that is, trust me, it's entire both work of load, entire work load, both load of work for me. So that's why I haven't really gone much. Let me see what's going on in the chat, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, nice one, Saad. It says plateau as your bodybuilders, no more muscles growing. That's true. Bodybuilders plateau too. You get so bulky, no more muscles. But for the musician, it is so many people plateau and don't even know that they've plateaued. And it's not a bad thing because, trust me, we all go through it. It's just knowing, first of all, being conscious that I've hit my plateau and I need to get out of this rut before 4 years pass and I'm still doing the same old thing. It's more frustrating when you're a beginner and intermediate and you've plateaued. Because as a beginner and intermediate, there's still so much more that you need to learn and you need to be able to accomplish. So when you get plateaued at that stage, it can be frustrating because you feel like you hit this glass ceiling. You can see through it. You can see all the cool stuff above that you want to be able to do and get to. You can see it. But that glass ceiling is shutting you off. So without any further ado, let me tell you some of the things that you can do to get you out of that plateau stage. So most of us here online are probably self-taught musicians. It's why we're on YouTube looking at videos and following instructors, because we're trying to learn as much as we can on our own for various reasons. Now the problem with that is you pick up bits and pieces of information from many different people, many different tutors over the years. But those are all segmented information. If you think of a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, if someone just scattered the puzzle pieces in front of you without any directions as to what to do, it's hard to fit those pieces together. Not only is it hard, it takes time. Now, when you learn from 20 different people and you pick up information here and you pick up information there, it's like getting pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And now you're left with your own devices to try and piece those together to create a nice smooth flow from beginner to intermediate to advanced. And so you might finish a section of that puzzle and then you realize that I'm missing other pieces. And that's where the plateau comes. That's when, boom, that's when it hits you that, you need more pieces and more structured pieces and more directions before you can start to see the bigger picture, before your growth can start to move steadier. My first advice is to invest in a tutor. That's it. Invest in some programs that will help you. If you like my programs, then invest in my programs. I know I have some really good courses. Others have testified to that I have a lot of systematic courses to help. Because the thing is, if you've been fumbling on your own for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years, and you've plateaued for 5 years, you haven't grown, that means the self-taught thing ain't working anymore for you. You've gotten as far as you can on your own, and you need now someone to help to guide you out of that wilderness of growth so you can get back on the path. So you need some more actionable directions, do's and don'ts, and how to implementation. So if you can afford it, you want to invest in your education. That's the first one. And that's what helped me to move past my plateau, because when I started music back in 2013, I was doing the self-taught thing. Not 2013, I always mix that up. 2003, long time ago. I was just out of high school and I was, trying to dabble, and I would try to look over the shoulders at the guy at church, see what he's doing. And after church, he'd show me 2 chords and I'd go home and I'd try to work on that for the entire week. Then next Sunday would show me something. After a year of doing that, I was growing, but the growth was so slow. He was a self-taught musician too, so he was only teaching me what he knows and what he picked up along the way. And a lot of it wasn't really good advice. However, I learned what I can. I learned what I can from him, but the growth was slow and I had more questions than answers. A lot of roadblocks. I was plateaued. So that's when I decided to go to music school. I was like, if I'm going to learn this thing and learn it correctly, I want to sit at the feet of some of the best people who do this teaching thing for a living. Now, mind you, I was 18 years old going 19, or 19 going 20, one of the two. So I was trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. So at that point, I decided I wanted to do music, which is why I went to college. Now, I'm not saying you have to go to college. For me, that was a decision as a young kid coming out of high school that I want to pursue music as a living, so I'm going to go and get certified. Because really, my intention was to go teach in a public school, work with the government and be a music school teacher, which is why I decided to go to college. But things change, and I didn't go that route. But I knew that if I wanted to grow past what I already knew, I had to get some form of tutelage. Now, for a lot of you, we're living in 2019 now. There are a lot of great online piano teachers. You just got to find the one for you. If I'm your guy, I'm glad you're here, and I'll help you get to wherever level you want to go. Trust me, I will work with you to get you to the level you need to go. For those of you who are currently working with me, you know how much I put into this. You know how much I try to work with you guys. But it will help you tremendously. So that's the first step to get you past the plateau stage, is if you haven't tried to reach out to either get some online courses or some form of membership tutelage, then that will be your first step to help you to go beyond this plateau stage. Step number 2, or I should say advice number 2, after you've gone to the course route or the tutelage route, you need to do a self-assessment. Yes. You got to do some self-assessment to figure out what's slowing you down. Because we talk about the different areas of music. You have theory. You have technique. You have ear training. And you have repertoire. Repertoire is just the amount of songs you know and can play. Ear training is how developed is your ear? Can you listen to a piece of music and quickly figure out the chords? Figure out intervals, everything as it relates to ear. Here, to be able to hear music and understand it from both a theoretical perspective and a harmonic perspective. That's ear training. So we got repertoire, the amount of music you know, ear training, which is the oral understanding of music. And then we have technique. Technique has to do with how efficient are you on the keyboard? Speed, accuracy, smoothness. So we talk about how well you know your scales, how well you know your arpeggios, how well you know your broken chords, how well you know your inversions. All of those things are technique building because those things strengthen these muscles in your hands, and it helps you to move with more delicacy on the piano. I get a lot of questions from folks asking about hand independence. How do I separate my hand? How do I do one thing in this hand? It's like the belly rub hand tapping kind of thing. Technique is what helps to solve problems like that, helps to create independence. And a lot of it can be solved from just practicing scales, arpeggios, broken chords, and progressions in different rhythms. So that's technique. And theory, is basically understanding the why behind music. You need to understand the why in everything you play. If you play something and you don't understand it, try to make it your goal to understand it. The more you understand what you're doing, the more your theory gets better. So those are the 4 areas: technique, theory, ear training, and repertoire. So when you do your self-assessment, you need to be honest, brutally honest. Which one of these 4 areas are you lacking? Because your growth is probably being held back because one of these areas is significantly underdeveloped in comparison to the other areas. Like I've come across folks who know a lot of theory. They've been around music for a decade, and so they understand from a theoretical perspective how things work. But they haven't spent enough time in the practical. So they could probably play 5 songs from memory. They know all the scales, but they can't really play any of them. So you realize that a person like that now might hit a plateau real fast because, while they understand music from a theoretical perspective, technically they can't execute any of that stuff. And so their growth is being pulled back. Or maybe your growth is being pulled back by ear training. Maybe you sit every day and you practice your scales and your arpeggios and your broken chords. And so, you have fairly efficient technique, but you can't hear anything. Or you can hear stuff, but you don't really understand what you're hearing. And so when it comes to, implementing little passing chords and runs and licks and lines, you struggle with that stuff because technically your ear is not there yet. And so what's happened? You're going to hit a plateau, and you're not going to be able to pass that plateau until you work out the ear stuff. Or maybe it's repertoire that's your problem. Maybe you have a great ear, good technique, good theory, but you just don't spend enough time learning songs. So when someone say sit and play, or someone say, hey, can you sub for me at church this Sunday and be the keyboardist, you don't know any of the church songs. You haven't worked on the songs because the more you work through repertoire, the more it helps your memory. I've probably at this point have a couple hundred songs memorized. Ask me how I was able to memorize all that songs, I don't know. But because I learned so many songs over the years, eventually a lot of these songs just stick with me. And then because also I have a good developed ear, what I don't remember, as soon as I hear the melodic line, the chords come back to me. And so we call that one hand wash the other. All of these 4 areas helps to make you into a better musician. The better your ear, the faster you learn songs. The better your theory, the faster you learn songs. The better your technique, the faster you learn songs. And so plateau, a lot of the times when someone has plateaued, it's because one of these 4 areas is being neglected, and until you sort of figure out which one of these areas you're struggling with, you can't pass that plateau. And no teacher can help you to pass that plateau until you've decided to put in the work in the missing area. So that's the second step. Assessing. Think about it. Do an introspective assessment and be honest and go, what is my biggest struggle? I sent out an email a few weeks ago. Probably some of you guys recognize it. And I asked you to list me one thing, the biggest thing that's struggling you. And what if I tell you that 80% of those emails, people reply with like 6 different problems? What did the email say? What's your biggest problem? Your single biggest nemesis? And folks list 10 different problems, 6 different problems, 4 different problems. And what that tells me is that folks not thinking more. They're not thinking strategically enough. If you're a beginner or if you're intermediate, there will be a lot of things that you just don't know yet, and that's okay. But at your level, you have to be able to narrow it down to one thing. One thing that if I solve this one thing, it would help me to move up, boom, a notch better. Then you figure out the next one thing, then you move up, then you figure out the next one thing. And that's how you begin to scale. But if you're saying, I need to know about passing chords, but I need to also get better with my licks. I need help with my hand independence. Man, I can never seem to listen to a song and figure out what key. You know what I'm saying? All those different problems, yeah, they all need to be solved, but they're not all as important. And so you have to sort of organize and see what are the most important, crucial issues that's keeping me back right now. Because again, if you're a beginner, passing chords is way ahead. You're not ready for that yet. Think about the stuff that's holding you back, boom, right now, today. August what? Today's what day? August 7th. What is holding you back today? And that's the one thing you want to focus on for the next few weeks. Till you get comfortable with it, then you think about the next one thing and you focus and you get back with that. You know what I'm saying? Let me see what's going on in the chat. Tim says, plateaus are a real phenomenon, but when that second wind comes, it's amazing, the growth. Oh man, I tell you, it's like lifting off. Once you figured out that one thing that's been holding you back and you skyrocket beyond that, then it's a nice feeling. But it's important for folks to be able to self-analyze. And amidst all the different noise and all the different things that people are telling you got to learn and you got to be able to do, you got to be able to sort of narrow it down and see what is my single biggest problem right now. And I've talked about those in many videos. What's the video? Let me see if I can pull it up right here real quick. For those of you online who have not seen that video yet, where I break down what based on your skill level, the things you really should be focused on. I'm just trying to see if I can remember the tutorial number 102, the path to success. Because, you know, if you're a beginner and you focus on those things at the beginner's level, you're going to realize that there's no room for plateau because you're doing what you're supposed to do. What happens now is when beginners trying to jump to intermediate without doing the work. And then they might learn some intermediate concept, but then they realize they just can't go any further because there's so much more work left at the beginner stuff that they jumped away from. Or when an intermediate player decides they want to jump to advanced, learn all the advanced concept, but they haven't done any of the intermediate work yet. You know, these are why plateaus happen. Now, when I went through my plateaus, I didn't know any of this. I just thought I should be learning everything that come across my table. Or if someone mentioned a concept, I need to know what it is and I need to go learn it and I need to perfect it. Because I thought that's how I got better, by just diving into everything. I didn't realize that I need to approach things in terms of steps and levels. So it's like you're building a house. You can't start erecting walls and scaffolding if you haven't have a good foundation yet. You know, the builder makes sure the foundation not only is set, but he makes sure that it's dried, gives it time to dry and cement and ready before they start to put up physical structure. It's a process. And the growth in piano is no different. You got to take things in terms of levels, and you got to give yourself time to sort of what we call solidify the new concept, solidify the new technique. Then you move up a step. Okay, so that's number 2. You got to self-assess in these 4 categories: technique, ear training, repertoire, and let's say ear training, repertoire, technique, and what's the 4th? I'm spacing out right now. Here we go. So it's repertoire, it's technique, it's ear training, and it's I can't remember it right now. It'll come back to me. Bonnie, is that Bonnie right there? Oh no, it's Assad writing something. All right, let's take a look at number 3. So we talk about self-assessment. So the third reason that one might experience, oh, that's one I missed, theory. There we go. Theory, technique, ear training, repertoire. Boom. Thank you, my brother. That's from Jack and Smooth and Johnny. Anyways, step number 3 now. The thing that might be holding you back and causing you to plateau is that you're probably not challenging yourself enough. And that's a real thing. Fear. People have fear for different reasons. One of the biggest fear we experience is, I'm not good enough, or I don't think I can do it. That's a real fear. The fear that I don't have it within me to take on more complex stuff. And that fear keeps you in your bubble. You know, probably you're playing for your church and you say, well, I can play all the songs every Sunday. I can play all the hymns. I'm just going to keep it right there. You know, I'm good. You know, I'm not going to try to learn about walking bass while improvising with the right hand. Or I'm not going to learn about how I can take a hymn and spontaneously reharmonize it. Or I'm not going to learn about modal mixture. I'm not going to learn about substitutions and reharmonizations. I'm not going to learn about none of that stuff because, you know what, I'm comfortable. But what happens when you get too comfortable? You get fat. I'm just messing with y'all. But yeah, if you get too comfortable and you don't exercise, you do get fat. But when you get too comfortable as a musician and you just do the bare minimum, you get stuck. You know, you plateau because you're not challenging yourself. You're playing the same old songs week after week that you've been playing for 10 years. And, you know, the newer songs, the more advanced songs, you just shy away from it. Why? Because you don't have to learn it. And you'll find yourself just plateau after a while. You become the dying dinosaur because you're not challenging yourself. And so don't be afraid to step outside your zone. Start listening to songs. And that's why I tell folks that not only does 50% of your time should be spent learning new songs, you should be spending those times learning more complex songs. So if you're a beginner, you know, you're working on some beginner songs right now, some songs that probably has just 4 chords or 5 chords. And, you know, once you learn those pretty well, you got to move up. Either you start putting little runs or start experimenting with 7ths and 9ths on those songs, or you start take on more longer, complex songs. You know, you keep to push yourself. You pace yourself, but you push yourself slowly. Start to learn newer songs, faster songs. Some people I know just like to play slow songs. You know? Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a fort. If the song is not that slow, they can't play it. What if you want to go, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. You know what I mean? If you want to take it up there, then folks starts to shy away. But, you know, you got to challenge yourself. You might not be able to play that fast, but you need to make it a goal. And you start trying to work your way up, you know? But you challenge yourself. You don't challenge yourself, you're going to find yourself going down instead of going up. You know, I can understand if you're like a super advanced person, you're like, you know what, I'm comfortable here. That's okay. But if you're beginner and intermediate, there's no time to get complacent and to start saying, well, you know, I'm just going to chill out and I'm not going to learn how to play in other keys. Because you know what, my church only playing 2 keys anyway, so I'm good. I don't need to learn the other 10 keys. I'm just, you know, no. That's limiting yourself. You're setting limiting goal and limited belief. And hey, God wants us to excel. As people of God, He wants the best out of us in all areas of our life, in our family, in our finances, and in definitely our praise. So don't limit yourself. You know, in this day and age, folks should get over this transpose button thing. You know what I'm saying? I know it's hard and it's a lot of work, but hey, ain't nothing in life that's easy and should be easy. So challenge yourself, especially when it comes to this key stuff. So many guys are still hung up on the key stuff. I still get tons of emails. They only want me to do songs in one key. Yo, can you just redo that song in C? Can you redo that song in F sharp? Can you redo, like, well, for one, I'm not going to redo the song because I don't have that much time. But also, me redoing the song is enabling that behavior that you got to learn everything in one key. The minute you start to do that, you're limiting yourself. If you start to challenge yourself to learn the song in its original key, whatever that key is, I guarantee you, in not very long, you're going to get over this phobia of playing in different keys. You know? So that's my advice for you. Let me see if I got nothing else here for you guys. So as we talked about challenging yourself, I wrote down some ideas as to things that a lot of people are doing. For example, are you one of those players that just use triads for everything? If you're a beginner, that's okay. You got to start somewhere. So you're going to use triads. But if you've been playing the piano for a few years and you're still playing only triads, that means you got some growth to do. You're setting up yourself for a massive plateau. So you need to step away, starts to add some 9s, some 7s. Make that your goal. Are you one of those players who only play in one or two keys? We just talked about that, so I won't blob on that anymore. Got to get out of the key phobia thing. Are you one of those players who constantly need to have a drummer and a bassist to keep timing for you? You know, like for example, when it comes to playing up-tempo praise songs, you know, we shall have a grand time up in heaven. We shall have a grand time up in heaven. Have a grand time. If you don't have a drummer and a bassist, you want to be able to play that song by yourself and still keep that groove going, which means this left hand has to go on a walk bass thing. And this hand starts to come chord. Now, that's a more of the advanced concept. But if that's one of your struggles, you know, that's a goal you're going to work for, you're going to work towards. And there are a lot of exercises that we can talk about in other videos that can help you to get to that level. But if you can't, if every time you need a drummer and a bassist to help you keep timing, then you're using them as a crutch. When you don't have a drummer and a bassist, you're kind of useless up there because you can't keep time on your own. Then you need to make sure you go home and work on that. Get what I call a drum pattern, drum beat mixer stuff. There's an app that I use if you have iPhone. It's called Drum Beat Plus. See there in the corner, the Drum Beat Plus. It's a great practice app, and it have all different styles of music too, of beats. So you can practice at different styles of beats, and you can practice at different tempo. Before there was iPhones and apps, I would just use an old Yamaha keyboard that comes with those little beats, and I'd practice to that. But you got to create an environment for yourself outside of a drummer and a bassist, so you can start work on your own internal rhythm. Let's see what else we got. Not a limitation is do you? Oh yeah, I just said that. Oh, so that's it. And I'm sure that there are more limitations, stuff that you've been doing for so long it's become a sort of crutch for you to just lean on. But that crutch eventually becomes your plateau. And that's why you're not growing. So when I sit and I look back in my 15 years of playing and teaching music, these are the things that came to mind. These are the things that I experienced, and a lot of other pianists I know went through these plateaus, and it's because of these things that we just discussed. You know, it's easy for us to turn a blind eye to something that we're not good at, you know, like playing in other keys or playing all 12 major scales with the correct fingering, or arpeggios, or, you know, learning new songs each week. You know, it's easy for us to just, you know, I'm not going to look over there. You know, I just pretend it doesn't exist. But that monster that you stuffed in the closet as a baby, grow up to be this big scary thing years later that's hindering your process. And you just got to get in that room, open the closet, drag that monster out, and put it down. You got to get rid of all the fears. There are a lot of things to learn in music. A couple of things I want you guys to take away is, one, you don't have to learn everything now. So you can't do everything now, that's okay. There are things you want to be able to do that you can't do yet, that's okay. There are things that you should be doing that you're not doing. Those are the things I want you to be concerned about. Focus on the things that you need to be doing that you haven't been doing. Because once you get those things, it's going to help you to be able to learn the things that you want to learn. You know, when I was young, my parents would say, you got to eat your vegetables. I hate vegetables. Now as a grown man, I understand the importance of vegetables. You know, and so this is me telling you, you got to eat your musical vegetables. Do some self-assessment. Figure out what areas you're lacking in, and then find that one thing. Not 5 things. One. The one that you deem most important. to your growth. Find that one thing, write it down, paste it above your bed so you see it at nights before you go to bed, and work on that. Once you've overcome that one obstacle, you're going to grow a little bit. You'll find that other obstacle and you knock it out. And that's how you continue to grow. That's how you get past the plateau phase. You know, we talked about step number 1. If you can't afford it, if you're financially able to afford investing in your education, do it. Find a tutor. If it's not me, find a tutor that you trust, that you believe in, and get some courses, get some direction. It will help you to grow faster than anything else. Because when you try to do this sort of on your own growth kind of thing, some people are able to do it, to grow on their own, but ask them how long it took them and how frustrating the journey was. I couldn't imagine getting to the level I am today on my own. I'm a pretty determined guy and pretty self-disciplined, but I don't think I could have done it. You know, because even when I had help, even when I had tutors, there were a lot of days that, man, I feel like beating my head against a wall because it was tough, it was hard, and I couldn't see the light of what I was doing. I couldn't really see the outcome of a lot of the things yet. So I couldn't imagine trying to do that on my own. So if you haven't been trying to get professional help in tutoring, do it. It will help you tremendously. And if the person you're working with is not working for you, then you need to fire that person and go find someone that you think will help you. So those are the ideas and tips that I have for you today. I'm pretty confident that if you sort of take these things that we talked about today and put them into action, by now and the end of the year, you'll see some significant growth. All right, so I'm going to turn to the chat now for some Q&A. Q&A time. I know the chat's been blowing up, so I'm not going to scroll back up. It was just too much to sift through. So let's start from now. If you guys, we can spend a few minutes, probably another 20 minutes, and we can just do some Q&A. If you guys have any burning questions, especially as it relates to plateaus that you guys want to ask me, now is the time. Okay, Bonnie, Bonnie, how you doing? Bonnie Simpson. Bonnie, you've been quiet for like a few months. How's everything going? I don't see much of you. Or I should say I don't hear from you much anymore. I hope you're doing great. Oh, Bonnie says she's challenging herself with transcribing now. That's great, Bonnie. That's great. Mark Max says, everything I have learned, I tried to move them through all 12 keys using the number system. That's a great idea, Mac. And for others watching, you should know that's a great idea. So it's important to move things through all 12 keys. See, I know, especially if you're a church musician, I know that most likely your church won't use all 12 keys. Most church don't. But you don't want to limit yourself based on what your church does. If you want to be a good musician, you want to be able to play in all 12 keys, period. Boom. That's the first, flat level every musician should strive for. Got to be able to play in all 12 keys. Doesn't matter if your church don't use all 12 keys. Make that your goal, because the thing is, once you get to passing chords, you're essentially borrowing chords from different keys all the time. So if you're not fluent in the other keys, you're gonna be like hitting a brick wall. Boom, you can't do it. I'll be putting out a tutorial on my website for those who are part of my courses next week, where I reharmonize "It Is Well With My Soul." And man, I put in some juicy chords and that stuff. Whole lot of I probably use every chord on the keyboard, but it's in a very cool way. But I was able to do that because I understand clearly and completely all my 2-5-1s. So I was able to reharmonize that song using every chord basically on the keyboard. But if you can only play in 2-3 keys, trust me, you will not be able to get away with utilizing those passing chords. No, you got to get over the key thing. All right, let me see questions. Oh, the questions are coming in faster than anticipated. Glad to hear that all is well, Bonnie. How do you practice looking ahead when sight reading? Well, my brother, I don't do much sight reading anymore. In fact, I don't do any type of sight reading now. I did that when I was a student in college and it was required. But sight reading is a matter of practicing. And it's a whole different ball game that unfortunately I won't get into because, on this channel we only do stuff as it relates to playing by ear. So you won't find much of anything as it relates to sight reading on that channel. But I'll tell you, it's a practice thing just like anything else. So Charles say, what is one ear training tip you wish you knew 5 years ago? Well, 5 years ago, I was already a serious advanced player. So let's say 10 years ago. What is one ear training tip I wish I knew 10 years ago? The ability to be able to follow a bass line. As I get more advanced, I realize that, if I could follow the bass line, it solves a lot of problems in terms of figuring out what's going on with the chords. The bass line, because the bass line is it's the foundation on which everything is built. And so if the chord is in first inversion, the bass line is what's going to tell you that. Doesn't matter what the keyboard player is doing. The bass line is going to dictate that the chord is in first inversion, or the bass line is going to dictate that the chord is a slash chord. 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when I was more beginner, intermediate, that's one tip I wish I knew. I wish I knew that, the bass line, you want to be able to understand bass line as if you were a bass player. Not only from an oral perspective, but also to think like a bass man. Because you see, my left hand, when I play like a bass man. Walking bass, or if I'm playing funk bass line, you want to be able to think like a bass player. So that's one thing I wish I knew back then, was like, pay attention to the bass player. Because if you can replicate what he's doing, it'll make you into a killer keyboard player once you combine the right hand stuff with it. So that's what I wish I knew. So Peter says, what is the best way to practice minor chords? The best way to practice minor chords is to practice them in a progression. So if you're practicing a 1, 6, 2, 5, the 2 and the 6 are minor chords. See, the thing is, chords don't just live on their own like that. They live in a part of a group, in a progression, as a song. And so you don't just sit and practice isolated chords. You practice them in progressions, especially popular progressions. In my course, 12-week progressions for beginners, I cover 6 different type of progressions, and then I move those progressions through all 12 keys. That's the best way to practice both minor chords and major chords, is in a progression, because that's the way they will appear in songs, in progressions, not as isolated chords. Bob Fridge says, since my weakness is limited repertoire, I'm going to challenge myself to earn 8 songs each week with just basic chords. That's a good idea. If you have the time on your hands, repertoire, because what happens when you're building up repertoire there's a few things happening. You're reaffirming the theory, you're reaffirming the chord progressions, you're building technique because you're strengthening, your chord shapes and your fingers and how you play chords, voicings, and you're learning songs on top of it. So when you're learning songs, it's not just you're learning a song. It's all the other areas of your musical development being addressed. And so I think, I don't know what people's schedule are, but I think everybody here should make it a goal to learn at least one song a week. So that's 4 songs every month. That's 48 songs a year. At least one song every week. If you can learn more than that, great. But if weeks are going by and you're not learning new songs, again, you're doing a disservice to your growth. So that's a good idea, Bob. Thank you for posting that. Bob says no more passing chords for now. Play basic songs in all 12 keys. Yeah, the passing chord seems like a shiny jewel to a lot of people, and they feel, man, if I could just learn passing chords, I'd be such a sick keyboard player. But really it's the icing on the cake. Passing chords and all that fancy stuff, it's like the icing on the cake. It's just there for decorative purposes. But without the cake, doesn't make sense to use icing. So without having a structure, without being able to play the song just the way it was written with just the basic chords, until you can do that and do it well, passing chords is not going to make much sense. The other thing folks forget is that passing chords don't work well as triads. So if you're trying to do 2-5-1 passing using only triads, it's going to sound weird and wrong. You have to alter the chords, meaning you got to be playing extended 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths for it to work, because you're essentially mixing non-diatonic notes with diatonic notes to create those extended chords, and that's why passing chords work. Now, if you try to do it using triads alone, you're essentially going to be playing all non-diatonic notes, and that's when it's going to be like, whoa, you just played the wrong chord. And so for folks who haven't properly mastered their 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths yet, you're going to realize that passing chords is going to be like rolling up water uphill or a giant rock, a boulder. One hand wash the other. You got to learn one thing first before the other thing makes sense. Not a great comment from Bob. Focus on musicality and making music, not playing fat chords. That's great, because fat chords has a place and a context. It doesn't work everywhere. And especially if you're not using it tastefully and musically, it can turn into a nightmare. The thing that you thought was going to make the song sound better can ruin the song if not used right. So Paul says, the more you move to the other keys, you forget what you have learned in the other keys. That's not true, my brother. That's a very incorrect statement. Unless you have the Alzheimer's, God forbid, you won't forget. It will strengthen and reaffirm that which you have learned. You won't forget. Trust me, it will help you. Moving to the other keys doesn't mean you forget the stuff from the other keys. Think about trying to view your town from a 2-story building. You can see some stuff, but the trees are in your way. Now, if you go to a 4-story building, you can see even better. Now, if you go to an 8-story building, wow, now you can see miles. What if you're in a helicopter? Then you can see everything. That's what it's like when you learn your keys. When you learn how to play in one key, it's great. You can sort of fumble your way through. When you learn a second key, for some reason, things become clearer. A third key, clearer. By the time you've gone through all 12 keys, you just see everything on the keyboard. You start to see chords that you even haven't played yet. That's why when I'm playing, I can spontaneously reharmonize, because not only am I hearing ahead, I can see the chord that I need to play 2 measures from now. You can't get that sort of futuristic vision, so to speak, unless you learn all 12 keys. So moving to other keys will work in your favor. Oh, man, the comments are coming in faster than I see. There's a lot of dialogue going on. Mr. Saad, you getting the folks all going in the chat. I should make you community manager for the chat. So that's great. I'm just looking for questions because I see some of the posts or replies to other questions asked. So Javier says, or Javier, you might have said it, but how can I get in contact with you to book you for an event? Well, Javier, to be honest, I don't do a lot of events, but I'm curious to hear what proposal you have, because I don't just turn things down unless I hear the proposal and see if it works in my favor. But send me an email to war85ren@gmail.com. So that's WAR85REN@gmail.com, and let me hear what you're trying to book me for, and I'll let you know if it's a good fit for me or not. Because I'm very peculiar now about what I do and where I go, because I have a limited time on my hands, especially now that I have a newborn. So I want to be home as much as possible. Tim Taylor says, Warren, what do I need to work on to turn my scales, inversions, and progressions into realizable music? So Tim, are you talking about writing your own songs? Because if you're talking about your own composition, that's kind of we would need to do some live stream on that. And if you guys are interested in, your own composition and live and sort of your own work and developments, I can do live stream of that, because I've worked with a lot of singers over the years. Some very sort of involved with how one can put stuff together so it becomes music, because I've done a lot of it. But I fear it would be a little bit too complex for this live stream right now. We would need more time to dive into that. So I don't know how to pronounce his name, Nianelli. So he says, Warren, hope you're doing well. I'm in hot water. Our pianist is relocating. I am under pressure to play during service. I'm a mid-level beginner. What do? I can't find key by ear. Well, it is definitely a tricky position you're in. My advice would be to take the challenge. If you can, take the challenge, and you will need to be prepared. In other words, if your church is used to just going by the flow and just pick songs at random, you'll need to talk them out of that. You're going to let them know if they want you to take this post, you need to receive the list of music that the church will be doing by Wednesday, and they need to not deviate from that list. If they deviate from that list during service, you just don't play, because you can't be up there fumbling if you don't know what you're playing. That wouldn't be fair to them, and it's definitely not fair for you. So if they can help you to do it that way, so, give you at least the list of songs that is needed, then you can work on those throughout the week, so you don't have to be up there trying to figure out songs on the spots and learn keys on the spots. But it's a great experience. Being thrown in hot water like that will definitely accelerate your growth, So take on a challenge. Don't shy away from it. It's the Lord opening doors for you. So good job. Bonnie, I heard the transpose key was like the Bermuda's triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. That's why I made it a point to master major scales. It's worse than the Bermuda Triangle. It's like space itself being launched out into space. Once you get into the transpose button, man, most people don't come back. They don't recover from it. It becomes this drug where you realize that all I gotta do is learn everything in one key and I'm good. It's so bad. The reason I never got into it when I started out, because I didn't have a keyboard that had a transpose button. I just had to figure out how to play stuff in other keys. You know why also I never got into the transpose button? Because I'm a singer. You can't sing all the songs in one key. It just don't work, And so I was always trying to sing along when I play, and I realized that I got to move certain songs to certain keys to match my voice. So I never fall into the transpose thing. Just never made sense to me, because I was like, I'd rather just learn it in one key. And then especially when I went to school of music, there was only pianos, actual pianos, not keyboards. So good luck trying to transpose using that when you're practicing. And for the first 2 years, I never had a keyboard when I was in college. I would practice on the school piano. I would learn everything on the piano. So I really escaped the transpose button. Bonnie says, your bass line tip helped me tremendously. Thank you, Bonnie. So Paul says, Warren, could you please tell me the bass line of all jazz chords? Well, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. All jazz chords? See if you can rephrase that question, because I'm not sure I understand it. What do you mean the bass line for all jazz chords? That's my interest, more bass line. I'll be doing some stuff around bass line, especially gospel church bass line, for up-tempo bass line walk, that's a big one, especially when you're playing like the Southern style gospel churches. Got to be able to walk that bass. You don't want to rely on a bass man. So I'll be coming out with some stuff along that line. So Bernita says, is there something we can use to hear only the bass line in a song? You would need what we call a DAW, digital audio workstation. If you're not familiar with that, because what you can do with a digital audio workstation, it's basically an audio editing program. You can just drag the song in there and just do a filter, cut out everything above a certain hertz, and you would only hear what's happening in the bass frequencies. That's a more complex approach. The easier approach is to get a headphone that has strong bass boosts. I know Bose is a good headphone for that. I use Audio Technicas. This is what I used to shoot all my tutorials with. And this particular model is, is it the M50s? Jesus, where's it written? I don't see where it's written. Oh yeah, so these are the M50s. And these have very good quality in terms of frequency. So I can hear the high end real good, I can hear the mids real good, and I can hear the bass real good, you know? So you get a nice kind of headphones. This is what I use. When I'm transcribing songs, this is what I use. You know, so you get a headphone that has really good bass frequencies, and that will help you. You know, it goes without saying, as musicians, apart from a keyboard, your second best investment should be in quality headphones. That stuff that they give you when you buy a cell phone and they give you some cheap headphones, no, you got to invest in something that's good so you can really, because if you don't have good headphones, you might think your ear is not as developed as it is, because if you can't hear clearly what's happening, it's going to be hard for you to figure out. But once you have good headphones, it goes a long way in helping you to transcribe faster and more accurate. So that's what I would recommend for that. So Flex says, how to practice voicing's appropriate chords. Well, it's stuff like this I offer in my membership and in my courses. I have courses that teach you how to voice triads, 7s, 9s, 13, 11s, and altered chords. And I teach you how to do them in all 12 keys. So if you're really looking for stuff like that, head over to the Piano Lesson with Warren, and you'll find exactly what you're looking for. Let me see. Esbon says, for me, I know I'm in a real plateau. I'm stuck on one key for 2 years now, though I know how to form major, minor, diminished, augmented tritones in all 12 keys. How do I overcome transposing, sir? We just talked about that. You gotta quit it cold turkey, like someone trying to quit heroin. You just gotta take piece of duct tape and tape up that transpose button. Out of sight, out of mind. It's one of those things you just gotta stop. Just gotta stop. Now, if you're currently playing for your church, and you might not be able to play some of the songs you used to be able to play without the transpose button, it's your duty to go learn that song in the appropriate key before Sunday. But you know, you got to make a U-turn, a 180 degree, no, did I say 90 degree turnaround? Oh, 180. You got to make a complete turnaround. It's not something you wean yourself off. You just got to just stop. Boom. Starting today, no more transpose button. So Bob Ridge, you say listening is amazing, but it's much harder to become an analytical listener. Why is that? You know, I actually have more fun when I'm analyzing what I'm listening to. I think I enjoy the music more. You know, when I'm analyzing and I'm grooving, you know. That's just me. So Francos says, do you have to practice every day? Can you use transpose button when you play all songs? So the first rule I'm going to say is that we don't even mention the word transpose button on this live or anywhere on the channel. The transpose button should be your worst enemy, and if you know how to surgically remove it from your keyboard, do it. If you don't know how to do that, get some tape and cover it up. Just remove the transpose button. Boom. Get rid of it. You know, back in the day, before keyboards, piano players didn't have this problem of transpose, because you would learn how to play on an actual piano. You either learn how to play in all 12 keys or you don't. but there was no workaround until keyboard became a thing and people discovered the microwave movement that if I just learn one key and use a transpose button, I can play it on 12 keys. So just forget about the transpose button. And no, you don't have to practice every day. I think 4 days a week of good practicing is good. You know, if you can find 4 days to put in some good practicing, that's good out of the 7 days. You know, if you want to practice every day, that's even better because what? The more you put in, the more you get out. Do I use an app to track chords from songs? Nope, no app. I use this, my ear. Note to self, learn at least 2 songs a week. There you go, Bonnie. No exceptions. The more songs you know, the better for you. So Paul Anthony Bell says, what is the best ways to practice moving between keys? I got 2 tutorials on this subject because it depends on what you mean by moving through keys. You're talking about modulations, transpositions, you know, I can't find them. If anybody knows which tutorials I'm referring to, please post it in the chat for Anthony Bell. But there are 2 tutorials on YouTube. I can't find it right now. I don't really like how the YouTube app is set up on the phone. It's hard for me to see my entire catalog of videos at once. Sometimes I have to go through this weird thing. But it's in one of those, it's on YouTube, where I talk about how to modulate between keys smoothly. Okay. Vianney, when do we use secondary dominant chords? Vianney, you know you're a member of my courses. There's a lot of stuff over there on that. But secondary dominant chords, we think about it, because there's no one answer. We oftentimes use the secondary dominant chords when we're doing 2-5-1 passing. So 2-5, that 5 is always going to be a dominant chords. And for example, if I'm in the key of C and I'm going to D minor, I can do a 2-5 passing the drum in a D minor. So I'll do an E half diminish, A7, that takes me to D minor. Now my A7 right there is a secondary dominant because A in the key of C is supposed to be A minor. Whenever you take a minor chord and you turn it to a major dominant chord, that's what we call a dominant 7th. And you most of the time use that when you're doing passing chords. Secondary dominance can also be built on a major chord. Like for example, if I'm going from C to F, especially in a bluesy format, I can make that C into a dominant 7th, which propels me to F. In that case, the C becomes secondary dominant because C in its diatonic form is not supposed to be dominant 7th. It's supposed to be major 7th. So that's sort of a quick and dirty way of thinking about when to use secondary dominance. But really, if you want to know more about secondary dominance, you got to check out my passing chords courses. That's where the gospel passing chords in the key of C and a secret to passing chords. That's where I talk about secondary dominance, when to use them, why I use them, how to voice them, and all that stuff. So a question from my brother, he says, if a chord has several notes in it, how do you train your ear to hear all the notes? all the time I hear a high, or all the time I hear the high and low notes of the chord and not the middle notes. So there are two ways of doing this. Instead of trying to hear individual notes of the chord, try to hear the chord quality. The quality of the chord is what you want to train your ears to hear. Like, for example, when I hear a major seventh chord, I know it's a major seventh chord. I don't need to hear the individual note to tell it's a major seventh chord. I can hear the quality of the chord that it's major seventh. And then when I know the bass note, I can tell, okay, for example, if it was a C major seventh, once I hear that C in the bass, I know, okay, it's a major seventh chord. So I know it's C, E, G, and B flat, and B natural. I know it's a major seventh chord. Now to take it a step further to figure out what voicing they're using, you listen to the high note. The high note is a lot easier to hear. So you said you can hear the high note. That's going to tell you which one of these notes in the chord is on the top. And that's how you figure out a chord. When I hear a sharp 7, sharp 9 chord, I'm not listening for individual notes. I'm listening for the quality. Each chord has a specific sound. And the quality of the chord is what you want to train your ears to be able to recognize. So once I hear a sharp 7, sharp 9 chord, I go, that's a sharp 7, sharp 9 chord. Now all I have to do is just find the bass, because the bass is going to tell me which chord it is, which sharp 7, sharp 9 chord it is, and then it's going to tell me, then when I listen to the high note, I can say what inversion it is. And that's how you figure out chords. It's not about so much trying. See, being able to understand intervals helps well when you're trying to figure out bass movements, because bass is single note. So being able to hear the intervals helps when figure out bass movements. But being able to hear chords, you don't want to listen for individual notes or individual intervals, because it's just too much going on, too much clusters. So listen for the quality. Train your ears to identify the quality of the chord. Okay, so Johnny D posted, says the how to modulate tutorial is tutorial number 63. Thank you, brother, for posting that. Okay, we'll take one more question, then we'll wrap up. So Michael says, what fast left-hand church songs do you recommend? Just go to YouTube and just type in old school up-tempo church songs or old school up-tempo fast songs, anything along that line, and you'll just see the type of songs that I'm talking about. So Vianney says, as a beginner, is it advisable for me to practice songs that are a little more advanced than my level of playing? Well, it depends on what you mean. How advanced? Because we just talked about the importance of challenging yourself. So yes, you should constantly be challenging yourself, but it still needs to be within a feasible level. For example, if you're a beginner and you're just trying to get comfortable with all 12 keys and comfortable in playing triads, I would say just keep working on songs with triads until you get more fluent. Once you get more fluent, then you most likely should start experimenting with songs with more 7s and 9s. But if you're talking about jumping to songs that has sharp 9, sharp 5 chords, constant modulations, and reharmonizations, then that's way too far. You don't want to jump that far ahead yet. Tackle songs based on the chords they're using. If you're a beginner, I would say you need to be working with triads up to a seventh as a beginner. You know, once we get to intermediate, that's when you start looking at songs with ninths and 11ths and possibly some 13ths. But as a beginner, you know, and beginner is also, I think of beginners in two levels. You have early beginner. That's someone who just started piano probably a month or two ago or 6 months ago. That's early beginner. They're very new to the piano. You have later beginner, people who are closer to more advanced. Probably they've been playing for a year and a half. You know, that's more of a later beginner. So it depends on where you are in the beginner. You know, if you're a later beginner, you should most likely at that point start experimenting with sevenths already. You know? And then an intermediate player is more, you know, and I don't want to start throwing around skill level based on how long you've been playing, because it's very possible for someone to make it to the intermediate level who's only been playing for 2 years or a year and a half. So it's not really about how long you've been playing. It's about what you can already do, how well you can already play songs and progressions. So if you're still struggling with triads, spend some more time getting better with the triads, and just keep learning more songs in that level, you know. And you can challenge yourself, but don't go too crazy with start experimenting with chords that you've never even heard yet. That's just going to discourage you and make your life a little bit harder. So Johnny D says, how long did it take until you could voice altered chords in a melody? Well, you know, it's not one of those things where you just wake up one day and be like, oh man, I can do it. It's a slow process, you know. You start to experiment with voicing altered chords, and every week you get just a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. Then one day you look back and you be like, oh, I guess I can use altered chords now. But it's a slow process, you know. It's a slow process, and you get better at it and better at it. So it's hard to say how long it's going to take. However, if you don't have the foundation in place, it's going to take you longer than it's supposed to. Which means if you're already not comfortable voicing ninths, 11ths, and 13ths, like diatonic ninths, 11ths, and 13ths, then altering those chords is going to be even more trickier. You know, so you want to get comfortable with the diatonic voicings of those chords before you jump into the alterations. So Bonnie is asking a question on someone's behalf. How to practice first and second inversions. So when I talk about practicing broken chords, that's a good way to practice isolated chord inversion. For example, I take a C chord. So if I'm using my right hand, I take a C major chord, C, E, G, and I'm using the fingering 1, 3, 5. Then you move up to E, G, C, that's first inversion, and I'm using the fingering 1, 2, 5. Then you move up to second inversion, which is G, C, E, and I'm using the fingering 1, 3, 5. Just sit and just block the chords like that. That's a good way to practice broken chords and blocked chords in inversion. And you know, it's not going to take you very long to be able to start seeing those inversions. So that's a good way to approach that. So Andy Sparks says, show some dominant sevenths arpeggios. You know, I'll be creating some, you know, a lot of folks have been asking about arpeggios. And when I think about it, I realize, you know, I don't actually have any courses that goes in depth in all the different types of arpeggios and ways you can play them. So that's coming soon. All right, so folks, I'm glad to see the chat is active. A lot of folks are talking. But we're going to close out here. We've been live now for about an hour and 24 minutes. That's it. Somewhere there. So we're going to close out now. I want to thank all of you who took the time out of your day, busy day, to hang with us, to talk about how you can break through plateau, and it just goes back to a lot of the same things that we've been discussing over this year, which is knowing your skill level and being disciplined enough to work on those things. Everything I tell you is not because I'm trying to sell you stuff or I'm trying to give you more work than needed. Everything I tell you is absolutely necessary. I don't shoot a tutorial on anything. I don't put up anything on my website that isn't necessary. I'm not going to give you stuff that you don't need. Everything I teach you is to help you to play like me. People say, Warren, how can I get to your level? Well, it's everything I talk about on this channel and everything that's presented on my website. It's the information that I have acquired over the past 15 years, the experience and the knowledge that I am, packaging in video lessons and tutorials, and I'm making available to you guys. And so if you think that you know better than me and you can skirt the work, you can just avoid certain things, and you're going to keep coming back and realizing that, man, I got to go back and just do it. And so if you just really do everything I tell you to do, just don't even question it. Warren said to do it, so I'm just going to do it. That was my mentality in college. Everything my teacher said to do, I do it. No questions asked. I believed in her that much. And it paid off because she was only doing these things for my benefit and for my growth and development. And I knew nothing. So why would I question her? Someone who's been spent the last 40 years of their life teaching piano. So I did everything that I was told to do, and I'm reaping the benefit of that today. So for all of you who say, Warren, I want to be able to play like you, I'm giving you the roadmap of how I did it. And I did it in 15 years. Well, less than 15 years, because I could play like this years now, So if you say you've been playing piano for 20 years and you haven't been making much progress, just forget everything you think you've learned in those 20 years and just start back from the scratch. You won't totally forget everything. A lot of the stuff you learn over the 20 years will be helpful, but just don't be afraid to just say, let's just pick this thing back up from beginner and work my way up. It's going to take you a shorter space of time to not only get back to where you were, but to go past that. Everything I do on this channel is for you guys, but don't try to skirt the work. Transpose button needs to be removed from your keyboard surgically if you can, or it needs to be taped up. That's the first thing. If you're going to ask me about transpose button, you're not serious. If you're still running around thinking you can just learn every song in one key and somehow one day magically you're going to learn the other keys, it's a delusion. You're lying to yourself. You can do better than that. The advice I have for you is learn every song in their original key. I only want you to change the song to another key if you're accompanying a singer, a soloist, or a congregation that you know cannot sing the song in its original key. Other than that, it will benefit you tremendously if you learn the song in its original key first. It will force you to learn songs in different keys, and in a very short space of time, this key phobia thing will be a nightmare of the past. Okay? So thank you guys for hanging. Thank you for being committed. Thank you for the support of this channel. The other day someone looked at me and said, bro, your channel has 71,000 subscribers. How did you do it? And I said, I don't know. I remember the days when I had 300 subscribers. I remember the day when I decided to start a YouTube channel. I never imagined it would have turned into this. I never imagined I would still be doing this, And I told that person that all I did was to be consistent. A genuine need, a genuine desire to just share the knowledge I have. And I feel like I've met real friends through my channel. People that I know by name even though we've never met in person, but it's a great experience, and I couldn't have done any of this without you guys who show up week after week to support, to comment, to like, to share. And so just know that you're appreciated. And one day, soon, I want to do a live event where I invite everybody from the channel, for those who can make it, just so we can hang out for a weekend, talk about music, and, really get to meet some of you in person. So I'm thinking about either doing something like that next year, late next year, or the following year. Reason why I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off next year is because next year we're going to be moving to Florida, and move in and trying to resettle, and all of that might take some time. So trying to plan a live event in the middle of all that might be tricky, especially seeing that it would be my first event. But it's something I definitely feel the desire to do. I feel the need. I would love to actually have events where I get to work and teach and talk with people in person outside of just YouTube. So look out for that. If you guys live south, it's going to be a lot easier for you to attend. I can understand for folks who live internationally that might be more tricky, but hopefully the Lord blesses me so I can start to travel the world too, so I can come to you and you guys don't have to come to me. All right, so until then, keep listening, keep singing, keep practicing, and I'll catch you soon for another tutorial. All right, so you all be well for now. Take care.